All right, so I'm just going to ask you a few questions about the show and about your past and Salt Spring, that kind of usual stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So, the reason we're having a conversation is because you just celebrated your 88th birthday, and you're celebrating it in a way with this show at Gallery 8 called 88 at Gallery 8. 88 pieces of work that cover your career. Whose idea was it to put on this show and to put it on this kind of show?
Rosali, the gallery owner, I don't know, we were talking about the fact that I'm going to be 88 this year, and he said, well, we should celebrate that somehow at Gallery 8. So I figured a retrospective might be fitting, since I was beginning to have some serious health issues and might not be able to work too much longer. So he got excited about it. And we planned it quite a while ago, while I could still walk around and find a picture.
So within like 2 or 3 years, it's an older idea?
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's been since for at least a year before.
And I'm assuming this is the first time you've had like this kind of a full retrospect. Have you had shows of a similar nature earlier in your career where it was maybe like a 10-year retrospect or something?
No, I always had shows where the latest stuff. And when I was in Ontario, the gallery I had a show for me almost every year of the newest work.
That would be the Village Square Gallery?
Yeah.
And those shows were always new work.
Yeah.
Is there any work in this show that would have been that period?
Maybe Prince.
Okay. And before that, you had a couple of big shows at Abercrombie and Fitch Gallery in Manhattan?
Yeah, that was 72 and 73. And that's how I got voted into the Society of Animal Artists, which is a rather old organization of animal artists, hard to get into, but I've been a member now 45 or 46 years. So I'm probably one of their oldest members.
Oh. Is that worldwide or North America?
Well, it's worldwide now. It started out just in New York.
Oh.
Based in New York, and Paul Bransom and a few well-known at the time illustrators started it, and they were going full swing when I got into it, and then later, about 3 or 4 years ago, I think the base moved to Colorado.
Really, Colorado?
But there are members from all over the world.
And is there a...
David Shepard was an early one, from England, several from England, few from Africa, a lot of U.S. and Canadian.
Do you have a connection with them still? Do they do newsletters or a website, or is it...
Well, they do a show every year.
Oh.
And every year your submission is voted on. It has nothing to do with your membership. But over the years, what they call a signature member is somebody who's managed to be voted into the current show 20 times or 25 times.
Wow.
And I've mostly gotten in, except the last couple of years, no.
So Do you know what number you're at? Are you like at 18? Are you getting close to the magic number?
Oh, I'm a signature.
Oh, you
member.
are?
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. So, doing this show, we've talked about the fact that you've had to get work that you either haven't seen in a long time that's been sort of buried in the studio or whatever, or get that was owned by other people from years ago, and you're bringing it all back. Is it like kind of like a high school reunion? You're getting to see things you haven't maybe looked at or in years, and you're suddenly going, oh, that piece, I forgot about that piece. Is it?
Well, I find happily that when I look back at something I did a long time ago, it appeals to me more now than it did when I finished it.
Really? You're not as critical?
Yeah.
Or
I don't know what that is. I think in some cases I'm surprised I could do that. But, no, I don't. Although I can see improvement. The last two, the jewel in the snow with the wonderful bush full of snow and a varied thrush underneath it. That's probably one of the best pieces I've ever done, and that's within the last 2 or 3 years, even while I was ill.
so that must be satisfying to see that
Yeah, that.
the art isn't like you're not
Yeah.
resting on your laurels, as it were.
No. And the latest one of all is a group of stellar jays
Right?
that we had this past winter.
I think that's just a painting over from the snow one. They're like in the same corner.
Yeah. Yeah, I think they were close together.
So,
Anyway, those are the two last pictures I've done.
and when you see the earlier ones, have you thought like, oh, that's a style I might want to go back to, or oh, that's an interesting thing I was doing. Wonder why I stopped doing that.
Well, I don't know. I must have. I didn't stick with a particular style, I must say. Although it was pretty much always realistic.
And it seems like you've done more experimenting in the last 10 years as far as like
And I fooled around with a lot of silly things just for fun. Just because if I didn't have a picture going in my mind, I had to paint anyway.
Right.
So I would paint something. And it might be just a pattern or a design or a dream. Who knows?
And
But
I thought
because I was always painting.
right. It's interesting to me that, and granted, I'm seeing it from the website's point of view, the way it's presented, but your subject for the most part is nature and cats, except for Eros, and you've got all these nudes and interesting.
Well, we had on
tangents.
Salt Spring Island for about 10 years, we had an erotic art show. And that's how those things came about. They were, because every year I would make a submission. I mean, it was a fun project anyway.
Is painting a human body as compared to an animal's body kind of an interesting challenge?
I'm very happy with the human body. That really, next to cats, are the most beautiful, and horses. Cats and horses. And I'd say cats first, horses second, and the human body third.
And it's interesting because the only horse painting I know of is that donkey series that's in the.
No, I did a lot of sketching of horses when I was assisting, teaching animal drawing in the Summer School of Fine Arts in Okanagan Valley for 10 summers.
Oh,
And in the summer, or in the fall, we often got opportunities to take horses into the mountains. And if we felt like it, when the horse was tied up, we'd take out the paint and sketch him.
You still have those?
I still have, and I have a lot of stuff I couldn't find because I haven't been able to walk.
That'll be for the next show.
Yeah.
So actually, let's take that and let's talk about the past a little bit. You grew up in New York, and your father was a painter and an
Yes.
artist. So,
Yes.
do you think that coming from a creative childhood, being in a creative environment, is a big reason that you became a painter? Do you feel people are born to do art regardless of their environment, or do you think the environment might dictate what you do?
In my case, my father recognized my ability early on. The first little picture he framed, matted, framed, hung up, was little more than a stick figure in a sort of a whirl, and he called it the dance, I think, and I was 22 months old.
Oh my gosh.
So he started telling me I was an artist. So I never questioned it, because he told me I was.
Did you have any other thoughts at any point, like, maybe I want to be a bricklayer?
Well, no, it never occurred to me to do anything else. The only thing was that because he told me that, and because there weren't, it seems like there's many more artists today, or maybe it's just there's many more people, but I was the one in the class that was asked to draw something if we had to. And I did a mural in the 6th grade of the Jungle Book, and I did a lot of, and the kids used to ask me to draw something. Draw a girl for me. Draw me Dorothy Lamour. And so I was the artist. And then later when I went to art school, I was shocked to find out that somebody next to me who's drawing like Michelangelo, that there's somebody better than me. It was a shock. And because I came away from high school with a couple of scholarships, I felt, I was up to snuff. So that took a little the air out of me when I found out there were a whole lot of other artists out there, especially in New York.
And you got the 2 degrees. What was your actual major? What did you end up with?
Well, it was commercial art at what was then the Art Career School. And the other one was the School of Design. It's quite a famous school right now. And I went in for an interview there to make my choice, and I discovered that illustrating fashion, which is what I wanted to do at the time, involved studying fabrics, hat blocking, texture, all things that really I didn't want to do. I just wanted to draw. I didn't want to learn how to make a hat or pleats or sew. And that was part of that whole regime there. And it's a very famous school.
Pratt?
New York, no. Dad went to Pratt. That was in Brooklyn. The New York School of Design?
Fashion?
Yeah, fashion.
FITM? No.
I think it was called that.
FITM?
No. The art.
Fashion School of Design?
Fashion School of Design.
No, maybe it's still there.
No.
Hmm.
No. But anyway, the Art Career School was strictly for commercial art. And I went there for 2 years and learned illustration, rendering, lots of life drawing every day. And there were 3 life drawing teachers, one of whom had taught my father at the Art Students League,
Wow.
Mr. Baker. And he remembered Dad. And then Mr. Duncalf. They each had a different approach to doing the human body, and very interesting. Very interesting.
And you, at one point, you're working at a Park Avenue couturier, if I'm saying that right?
Couturier.
Were you designing or illustrating
Well,
for
I was
designer?
illustrating her designs. So
Okay.
that was the ideal, except that she also ended up expecting me to serve tea to her clients and pick up all the pins after a session, and I was doing much less drawing than I expected, so I didn't stay.
So how did you go from being this I want to be a couturier, designer, illustrator, to someone who specializes in animals and nature? What was the transition?
Well, it was just, I don't know, my first job when I was 15 was with a summer job with a New York printer, and it was opaquing negatives. And that's, you do very carefully to go around the lines of the negative, make sure all these spots are covered and opaque before they print. And I really never did any other job after that. That was with a brush, and I've been with a brush ever since. But I didn't work for anybody else again in that way. I just freelanced.
And it was through freelancing that you got more into nature, or
Well, Canada.
so moving to Canada?
Plus, it was the time. It was the time. It was the beginning of Greenpeace, a whole lot of major anxiety organizations that were trying to save the planet and the animals on the planet, and I got right into that.
And when you started illustrating animals, is that what led to having cats like Ishka and other, or were they
Yeah.
hand in hand?
Yeah, in a way, because I had always wanted an ocelot, and I after some article I saw in Life magazine, but that wasn't it. I ended up kind of rescuing these guys because people didn't know how to handle them. Because I had studied what a cat was like in the wild, and people that both have jobs and stick them in the cellar behind a gate, they have no idea what they're doing. An animal like that, who's prepared to hunt every minute just to keep himself alive, just can't be stuck in some room in the basement with, for hours at a time. So the first one was one I rescued when we went to Florida, and I saw in the paper a couple of guys that didn't want to keep the ocelot because it was climbing up the curtains and so on, and so I relieved them of the ocelot, which turned out to be a margay, which is a tree ocelot and smaller. But that got me into the Long Island Ocelot Club, and from then I learned a lot of tragic problems, and I wasn't standing up for the group that said nobody should ever have one, because I must say they're fabulous to have. But you have to be somebody that lives with them. And I was always home. I was always working at home. So it was no problem for me to have an animal that needed my attention. And slept with us and everything.
Is this in New York or now in Canada? When the
Now
first
I'm
cat?
in Canada.
You're in Canada. This is Ontario?
Yep.
Okay. So at this point, you've got the cats, you're full into the animal, you're starting this company, Pepper House.
Yeah, that was my husband's idea. And it was okay. We printed what at the time I was just doing black and white dry brush. And I don't know why. It was kind of following into my father's footsteps, who was working in pen and ink for his major career. Black and white. It almost looks like what I was doing. even though I promised myself, watching him working, I'll never do that myself. But I ended up doing almost the same exact thing.
And when you did all these different scenarios and you moved around and then you ended up in Salt Spring in 85, I think?
Yeah.
So,
85. When my husband died in 84.
oh, so it wasn't that long after.
No. And I didn't actually move out till a couple of years after that. But I got the studio the same day I arrived on Salt Spring Island. I saw this house and I went to a realtor and I made a bid on it. As soon as I got off the ferry on Salt Spring Island, and a deer jumped into a churchyard like a gazelle, and the butterflies were buzzing around, and I just felt like I was home. I don't know how. Had to live here.
How do you
I'm
think?
still here.
How do you think it affected your work? I mean, besides just having an amazing canvas, amazing subjects, but I mean, being in a cultural environment like this.
I don't think it affected my work, although I did a whole set of stuff that were not in this show. When I first came out for a couple of months before I actually went back to Ontario and decided to sell the house there, I did a sunrise or a sunset sketch in oil almost every day. I was so fascinated with the big sky I had with nothing in the way and water from, ear to ear. I also went swimming in the water in front of the house, which was the sea, every day, whether it rained or or didn't.
And so you did a sunset every day, and
Yeah.
so how many sunsets did you end up with?
Oh, lots. I did about every time the sky was interesting, which was most of the time. You'd have to do it in about 30 minutes. Was the outside before it would change too much, and you'd have to do a different picture. But I sold, I don't know, 40 or 50 of them.
Oh, wow.
And I still have about 10.
And besides being here and having all this beautiful country and the animals, was it an effect in either way, positive or negative, as far as living in such an isolated community and also living in a creative community?
Isolated, I love.
What about the creative parts of it, as far as living in a kind of an artist community?
Well, I had been in New York for quite a few years, and every now and then I must say I missed that atmosphere, because in the city there are galleries everywhere with top-notch work, and the Metropolitan Museum of Art has, no competition. And I missed that. You could be in New York and there's 1,000 choices of some place to go every given hour. If it's a concert or a show or just a simple recital or a showing. Fantastic. I missed that, but not enough to go back.
And do you find that being here and but being able to still, like, being close to some things, like going to Vancouver or Victoria for their scene, or is it just not the same as New York and not really?
If it's not the same, it doesn't do anything for me. I'd rather be in the country.
And as far as your work and stuff, I mean, do you feel like if you hadn't ended up in Salt Spring, it might have gone in a different direction, or was this sort of a destined thing?
That didn't change what I was painting.
Yeah.
I mean, other than when I was painting what I saw here. that's different from what I saw in Ontario. But as far as painting animals concerned, that's what I was doing. I couldn't help it. And when I had the ocelots, which ended up being a period of almost 3 decades, I rescued one from Vancouver, where the parents or the owners had they were both working, and that was a situation where they were keeping it in the basement, and when they sent it back to somebody else in Ottawa, and then somebody in Ottawa gave it to someone else in Ottawa, and then couldn't handle her, and so I stepped in because I already had the one little Margay who was kind of nutty, and she was 2 years old then. She'd been a year with the hunter who killed her mother, and a year with this couple who couldn't handle her. My husband, fortunately, was very tolerant of this whole idea, and she wouldn't eat for a month. She hid in my studio, so I couldn't go in there. She just growled, and he somehow persuaded her to eat ice cream, and she had a bowl of ice cream every night of her life after that. Or else she'd stand on his chest and growl till he went and got it in bed. Anyway, she lived to be 25. I even brought her out to the island here with me. She lived until 1990. We got her in 68. She was born around 65, 66.
That's a long time, I take it, for a cat out of the wild?
Yeah,
or a cat, period?
any cat, period.
I'm curious about something. I've noticed that all these different paintings of animals, the big cats in particular, they're always very serene and calm. You've never painted, that I've seen, an animal that was, doing anything menacing or
No.
threatening. It's always
Well, no.
very calm. Is that intentional?
No, because I wouldn't be interested in doing it that way.
Or not necessarily like angry,
Early
but
on-
hunting or something.
Early on, the animals that you would see were illustrations for hunting magazines or whatever, and so that was kind of their thing, was a snarling tiger or whatever. No, I hated those. And because I was working the animals from game parks or zoos, where like the Buffalo Zoo, the zoo in Montreal, the Calgary Zoo, the game farm in Penticton, where I spent 10 summers teaching. You got to know the animals as they were happy in large enclosures, and they mostly lie around unless they're eating. But when you're doing sketching of an animal to really learn what he feels like and looks like, you set it up the way that donkey painting is, with several of them. You set up a canvas. You start where you see what he's doing. He may have his back to you. You start there. He moves. You go to a new drawing. You're usually painting them, but you might be using charcoal. Another one. So your panel is full of the beginnings of a sketch of an animal in one direction. He may be sleeping, standing, running, for that matter, or facing you, sideways, whatever, 3/4 view. He'll get in that position again, you continue on that sketch. You get in that position, you continue on the sketch there, depending on what position he's in. And the donkey sheet is a good example of how that comes out. then you have several different poses, and later, if you want to do a larger painting of this animal, you've got lots of stuff to look at.
That's
refer
cool.
to.
So, I'll ask you one more question to wrap this up. You've got this show that has got this representation of your career. If a tourist comes over today and they have no idea who you are or anything, they're just walking around and they walk into Gallery 8 and they come upstairs and they spend a little time in the room, is there anything you'd hope they'd get? Like, was there something they would maybe see by seeing this career of someone they don't know?
Well, hopefully, if the animals, if I've had feeling for the animal, and usually I do, or I'm not painting them, they'll get something directly from the animal, I would hope, and I feel more respect for them.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah, that's the only thing I can think of. But otherwise, if you don't like animals, don't bother to look, because they're mostly all animals. I guess all.
Except for Paul and a few nude people, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Right. That's right. Okay.
Well, that's what I got. Thank you.
Okay. You're welcome.
Not too painful, I hope.
No. No.